some people have tried to, you know, make the way we engage a model, and they've studied it, and they've written dissertations and, you know, their thesis on how we engage. And they've given it different names like the integrated community engagement model, but really it comes down to, we live here and this is our home. And we care because these are our friends and our family, and this is our community. Our kids all, we go to the same school, we've been raised together. This isn't about trying to achieve conservation outcomes. This is just about a community fighting for its own well-being and for its ability to make its own decisions, especially ones about industry that is going to impact us the most. So we are the ones who are going to have to live with the consequences, positive or negative. And as such, we should be the decision makers. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing industry come in and try to divide communities, you know, finding a few people that really need help. And so they offer them money, which they need, and people will sacrifice future health because they're in crisis, because they need to meet basic needs right now. They're not thinking about the future because they don't actually have that luxury. And I know that when hereditary chiefs or different organizations sign with oil and gas or sign with the industry, they're not doing it because they want a pipeline through their traditional territory. They're doing it because they're tired of being impoverished. They're tired of an 85% unemployment rate. They're tired of hearing about yet another suicide in the community. They're not signing with industry because they want it in their backyard. They're doing it for the same values and the same principles that we are fighting those industries. They just want a future for their family. That's how SWCC engages. Is we're just here, and we know that if we have a strong, resilient local economy, we're not dependent on outside, and we're not as easily manipulated by outside influences because we've got our own economy sorted out. And I think environmentalists often miss that. They're fighting so hard for climate and for land and for wilderness and for animals that they fail to understand our part of that equation. And that is simply that if we are healthy and we are wealthy, we don't need all this other stuff. Industry does not then have the opportunity to prey on the poverty of communities. And so that's why we engage in a way that deals with community economic development. That's why we have the Youth on Water and Women on Water program. We're getting people out to the watershed so they maintain that connection. They feel that hope. They get that strength that you feel when you're out on the land, and it's strong. And here in this, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because the whole entire upper half of the Skeena watershed, there are no roads. There's no forestry, there's no power lines. If you want to raft the Skeena River, you got to fly in by helicopter or plane to get up there, or you got to do one hell of a horse pack. But it functions as the lungs and the liver for the rest of our watershed. And you know, when we're surrounded by all this amazing water and all these fish, it's really easy to take what we have for granted. But as soon as you travel outside of this region, you realize people don't have this anymore. They can't just dip their head in the river and drink like we can, because it's not polluted. Not up here. The Skeena River, the Stikine and the Nass watersheds are three of Canada's greatest wild salmon bearing watersheds. The Skeena alone contributes $110 million to our local economy, which is an awful lot of money. Our watershed it's 54,432 square kilometers, which is a bit larger than Switzerland. There's only like 60,000 people that live in our watershed, so $110 million is a major economy for us. Forestry in its glory days was about $140 million. So salmon is one of our biggest economic drivers in the region. I was a big game hunting guide. I worked as a welder. I worked as a cook. That's what I did before this. My education was in chemistry. And this wasn't exactly my natural pathway. My dad is is a rodeo stock contractor. So he's a cowboy. He supplied bucking broncs to rodeos. He was also a logger for 45 years. You know, this wasn't exactly the natural path for me to take, except that I live here and this is my home, and other people were making decisions about its future. And we knew that we'd have to be the ones left to deal with the consequences, which in this region that's the history of this region. You know, it started with the fur trade. They came for the furs, they came for the minerals, they came for the children, they came for the trees, and then they came for the minerals again with more mining, and now they're coming, they want to put pipelines and for gas and oil and build massive terminals. And the things that have sustained us through all these booms with really long busts, they want to threaten the very things that have kept us sustained, and that's a healthy watershed. And all we have to do is maintain a healthy watershed, just not screw it up. 85% of the population here is from the Gitxsan Nation, so I'm a minority. And I know that by living here on Gitxsan territory, I have a responsibility. And that responsibility is stewardship to the land and to understand my role in the community, which I'm constantly learning. And I'm not First Nations, but I was born here, and so was my father, and my grandmother in 1918 was born here. And that you know, we're settlers. We're part of that pioneering community that came in, you know, 100 to 200 years ago. And it was the Gitxsan actually who helped my family thrive here. And it was the relationship with the Gitxsan. I know that because of the suffering of the Gitxsan people and of First Nations in Canada, settlers, you know, non-Indigenous people, we flourish. We do well because of what we have, because of what's been exploited, what's been stolen. So I know that I live on unceded Gitxsan territory. I know that I live on stolen land. And so then there's this tension inside of knowing that I have something that was stolen, even though I didn't steal it, my dad didn't steal it, my grandmother didn't steal it, but it was still stolen. And it's still in the living memory of the Gitxsan and the people who live here, and it's certainly in my DNA. And so there's this tension, and you know, we seek to try to find ways to fix it or to become comfortable with it, but I don't ever want to become comfortable with that. What I want to do is use that tension that I have inside myself and walk differently, make different choices, recognize that reconciliation needs to be done. And reconciliation doesn't mean that everything's going to be fixed. It means you acknowledge these tensions, you work with the community in which you live to try to move forward